Hey teachers, it's Tim here. Just wanted to let you know that on November 6th, I'm running one of my most popular online workshops. It's called the 6 Cores of Music Teaching and Studio Business Success. This practical workout, complete with a 2-page handout, involves a critical visioning exercise, finding out where you sit on the integrated music teaching matrix, and of course, unpacking where you rank on the 6 cores. Even if you've participated before, you can use this time to reset your vision and find out where you've improved on the 6 core rankings and therefore where to focus your energy for maximum impact in the next 6 months. And if you've heard about our top-level 12-week studio transformation program that we open the doors to twice a year in January and July, then attending this workshop is the first step in getting a place in the next cohort. And because it's so popular, I'll be running the workshop at 2 time zones to suit everybody around the world. Head to topmusic.co/workshop to secure your free place. Can't wait to see you then. You're listening to the Topcast, the original podcast for growth-minded instrumental music and voice teachers since 2015, with your host, Tim Topham. Our mission at TopMusic is to empower instrumental music and voice teachers to find and nurture their innate creativity so that they can teach lessons that are innovative, integrated, and inspiring, and that will have a positive, lifelong impact on their students. Join us each week as we interview teachers and creators from around the world and unpack fun and exciting ideas to maximize your teaching and studio business success. Welcome back to the Topcast, teachers. It's great to be spending some time with you again today. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your workday with me in order to tune in to today's episode. We've got a bit of a special one today, and you actually might prefer to watch some of today's episode because what we're actually going to be doing is looking back at a vintage piano lesson from 1984. Beck from our team and I are going to be reviewing it and talking about it. Now, this is a really special piano lesson because it's actually Beck herself as a child. So Rebecca Stewart's our head of certification and our community manager here at TopMusic, and she's an incredible teacher, and it's fascinating to see where it all began for her. And you're going to be really inspired by this episode because her teacher is, well, an incredibly inspiring man who I'm also interviewing separately in next week's episode. So we'll actually get to find out more about the background to how this teacher went about learning the teaching that you're going to be seeing. Because the other thing you're going to notice is that the lessons here are not your traditional piano lesson from the 1980s. By far, this was well ahead of its time. And her teacher, Edward, who you'll hear or watch in this video, was incredibly forward-thinking and using Orffschul work and Kadai and all sorts of singing and movement exercises in this piano lesson, which was recorded in front of an audience of young teachers who are learning how to teach. Look, it's just a fascinating experience, and I really enjoyed sharing this with Beck and now sharing it with all of you. So if you'd like to watch the video of this lesson, then just head over to my YouTube channel where you'll be able to find it, and we'll put a link to that in today's show notes, which is at topmusic.co/episode 388, if you'd prefer to just go through and click. So my guest today, and also the student in the lesson, Rebecca, grew up listening to her 3 older sisters practice their musical instruments. She delighted in her childhood music lessons and wanted to teach young children in a fun and creative way. Her piano teacher at Melbourne University recommended the Yamaha method, and Rebecca taught with the Yamaha Music Education Centres from 1998 to 2018. She loved being a national teacher trainer with Yamaha and enjoyed opportunities to travel to Toronto and Tokyo for Yamaha teacher development events. In 2016, Rebecca went to Jakarta, where her 8-year-old Yamaha student performed his original composition at the Asia Pacific Junior Original Concert. Her first book, Sight Reading Secrets Grade 1, was published in 2004, and there are now 9 books in her series. In 2023, Rebecca worked with me in developing our TopMusic teacher certification, and she's now a key part of our TopMusic team. Beck Stewart, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Happy to be here.
So we've worked together for a little while now, and you're amazing. You're an incredible teacher, incredible member of our team. Tell us a little bit about the teaching that you do at home and also what you do in TopMusic.
Sure. Well, thanks for that glowing introduction. I have about 40 students who I teach piano, a combination of at my home and at a local school. And I also work with TopMusic in a community managing kind of role, connecting members together and helping them find the right resources. And I'm head of certification, so I get to help teachers who want to upskill and connect with resources that will give them professional development that is particularly relevant for where they are right now.
And we've just been hearing in the last few weeks on the podcast about how TopMusic certification, the self-paced version of that, is being introduced in Studio Plus. I did an episode on just certification. So if you've missed any of those, listeners, go back and check them out. Beck has been instrumental in helping us organise all of those and arrange it, and continues to work with our teachers who are going through the program. So thank you, Beck, for all your help on that.
My pleasure.
Today, we're doing something quite different, and this is actually, we're recording this as a video as well, because we are about to watch together a very cool video. Beck, do you want to tell us what we're about to watch or listen to, depending on what you're doing?
Sure. So when I was a young thing, I had piano lessons with Dr. Edward Gifford at what became the Tasmanian University campus with music. And we're going to watch a little bit of a lesson.
So how old are you? How did you come about this footage, by the way?
Well, my mum kept very good records. And when we were going through her things, we found an old VHS cassette that we'd kept. It was a lecture that he was giving, and I was his live student guinea pig. And it was about, I can't remember, I think it was an hour and a half lesson or something enormous, but we're not going to watch all of that today. I've just found my favourite bit.
We've cut it down, and we'll be sharing that together and reacting to it and watching it and talking about what it means. I must say, I felt really awkward when I shared recently on YouTube a video of me as a 14-year-old being taught by Miss Mac, and it was quite cringeworthy to watch for myself. Other teachers have loved it. They've found it really interesting to watch. But did you find were you kind of awkward? I know you're a bit younger in the video, so I was a bit of a grumpy 14-year-old, which I don't remember being.
That's awesome. I did enjoy that video and seeing you working on those things. I think I'm 8 in the video. It was funny hearing my accent. I feel like I have a really strong Australian drawl of an accent. Also, in those days, it wasn't so common to diagnose girls with ADHD. So there are quite a few moments in that video where I'm like, oh, look, there's a good symptom. Oh, look, here's another symptom.
Interesting.
So that was quite interesting for me as well.
Yeah.
I kind of liked the camera, though, I think. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, you're very comfortable being filmed. And do you remember, just before we hit play, do you remember much about the lessons themselves without looking at the video? Like, are they in the back of your mind?
Yeah, definitely. I remember Dr. Gifford being just really warm and smiling, and he was excited about the music. I remember going to some group lessons with other kids, and we played tuned percussion and we performed things. I remember his big, huge, fluffy dog, and he would always have a cup of coffee and all of those kind of things, like those sensory things that we remember. But I remember it just for fun as well. I remember using puppets and props and moving around the room and so on. So it's true. Anita Collins is onto something, when something is novel and it brings us emotion, then that connects with the meaning and connects with our memory as well.
Yeah, I remember Miss Mac always had pugs, like the really kind of dogs. And the one I remember was called Dim Sim, and that was always hugely amusing. I thought, Dim Sim the pug, who used to come and sort of nuzzle at your feet. Anyway, isn't it funny, the things that you remember from your lessons? All right, I'm going to go to screen share now. So let's hit play and have a look at the start of the lesson.
I'd like to introduce to you this afternoon Rebecca Cleasy. Rebecca is how old? 7. Rebecca and I have been working together for about 18 months now. I'm not sure who has the most fun at our 45-minute lessons each week, but hold the handle up and down, then the top will spin around, humming softly as it spins, quickly wind it up again. All right, let's put all the words into our feet.
Like, had you already knew this song, right? Yeah. And so this is just a prime example of a whole body learning approach to getting the music into your body. So can you tell us, was this a regular thing for you in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can still remember that. And I think that was, at the time, I just thought that's what piano lessons were like. So I think they probably weren't like that. But you can see he was quite happy to just use whatever physical movement would match in with the music, which then helps that music to be really locked into your brain.
Yeah. And I noticed one thing that other teachers may find a little bit uncomfortable is the use of touch on you.
Mm-hmm.
Probably something that we don't see so much of today, but more common back then. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. So my mum was always there at the lessons as well. And so, there was that kind of idea that, parents were happy to be part of that and to see what was happening. But it was also a normal thing to be doing in a classroom as well. At that stage in history, it was quite common, for the whole class, including the teacher, to hold hands and do an activity. So, now we're in a different culture and, we're just really mindful of consent and just finding different ways to do things. I think you could easily have a parent come and do this activity with the child, and you as the teacher could lead the activity, and the parent could be the one, pushing the spinning top up and down or whatever.
Yeah. So I think he's just said, let's put this into our feet. So let's see what happens next.
Where we go? Ready? Pull the handle up and down, then the top will spin around, humming softly as it spins, quickly wind it up again. Can we do it to T's and Tars? You have a go on your own, all right? T, 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 tar. T, 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 tar. T, 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 tar. T, 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 tar.
So I noticed a couple of things there. So the second part, he moved into, shall we do the TT tars? So this is using Kadai. The thing I noticed in when he said, let's put it in the feet, what did you notice about his singing? Did you notice?
We started singing together and he kind of dropped back.
Yeah, and he let you sing. You've got a beautiful voice. Yeah. And I think that's
it was fun to sing.
Yeah, I think that's a really clever modelling from his part. It's like, let's get you singing, but actually he knew that you were confident and he just faded out, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah. And then he said, now you do this next part by yourself. And I didn't do anything. And he just started us off together also. So kind of he was just watching the room to see when do I need to support and when do I need to step back, which was clever.
And so now we've moved to the piano, and it's a great reminder of how much you can do before you even start touching the piano to get the music into people's bodies, students' bodies. This is what we're talking about with whole body learning, right? Get the music and repeat it as many times as you can in different ways. I can't remember what Paul Mike calls it, something repetition. Clever
Sneaky repetition.
Sneaky repetition, that's it, yeah. Where it's just you do it so many times, but it's always different. And we've just seen 3 different ways to repeat it. Did you get a sense that was, as a child, you wouldn't have known that was what was happening. But as teachers, we can look at it and go, we need to repeat this as many times as possible, but keep it interesting.
And it's also thinking about the teaching points in multiple ways and not just whacking some actions on the top, but having a reason behind each of those things. So even when I was putting the TTTT tartars in my feet, I went left for the first bar and then I went right for the second phrase. And so that's clever as well because he's feeling this phrase goes this way, this phrase goes that way. From a composition perspective, like you go one way and finish on the dominant, and then you go the other way and you finish on the tonic. All of those kinds of things. It's not just, sprinkle sugar on the top of something. It's actually work it all the way through the recipe.
Fantastic. All right. Let's see what happens now that you're at the piano.
Cheating. Black notes.
We should probably stop there because this isn't something that we often do. So the first thing you did there was you played and you sung solfa. Yep. So we've done tars and titis, kadai, and solfa now as well. There are, again, so many different ways to pull this little piece of music apart. Whereas old school way, we would just grab the music up. We wouldn't sing it. We wouldn't even look at the lyrics. We would just go, okay, da, 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 that's an E or a C or whatever it is. All right, here it is on the piano. Let's play it. Did you use a lot of solfa?
Yeah, we did a lot. And I think it had gone to the back part of my brain for many years since I'd learnt with Mr. Gifford till I was about 10 or 11 or something, and he moved away. And then when I was 21, I started teaching at Yamaha, and at Yamaha we sing in fixed do all the time with our students. And so it kind of had came back to the forefront again, but so handy to be able to internalize the music and to be able to notice the shape of things and to get students involved not just with fine motor, but with their whole bodies as well.
And then we've just seen transposition, which is a little bit more rare for most teachers. So why is he doing this? And was that regular for you?
Absolutely. This song, man, this piece, I continue to teach to my students. It is. And I continue to teach it to all my students. If I'm ever teaching Alberti, I teach this piece first. If I'm ever teaching students about, major chords in multiple keys, we learn this piece. I thought it was hilarious how he said, you're cheating, black notes. Like it sounds kind of telling off. It was so captivating that it was playful and it wasn't, you've made a mistake or whatever. It's just, no, now we're doing this. But for children, it's really fun to understand, I can play this on all these different keys. It's a bit like a board game or a computer game or something. It's like, I can try this, I can try this, I can try that. And it's interesting to see quite a few method books now that weren't around in 1984 are also playing around a bit more with this transposition idea, not just transpose it into G major, but try it here, try there.
All right, let's go on.
Terribly good sight readers, but I have used my little recorder books to supplement.
Silent river night creeps over, children slumbering in their beds.
Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so Beck, what's going on? This is meant to be a piano lesson, isn't it?
It's so fun. It's so fun watching this. Oh my goodness! Like the first comment he made was something like, "We're not great sight readers." I'm like, that's ironic because my website is sightreadingsecrets.com.au and that's him publicly declaring me not a great sight reader. But I reckon this singing and this recorder playing and the duet side of things, I think that's what made me read because there was just so much, now let's play this, now let's play that. I think that was really handy, much simpler to read, just one line, just one melody line. And the fact that he was playing along counter melodies with me just made the music so beautiful. It's not a boring sight reading exercise. It's just part of creating music together, kind of an extension of singing almost. But did you see the little moment?
Yes, I'll go on.
Well, that's one that I'd known, but that was kind of his way into reading.
Got it.
You have to kind of work out, are you singing this part? Are you playing that part? But did you notice that I was conducting him as well?
I did, yes, at the start.
That's sweet. He's just saying, now you do this, now you do that. And just making that a normal part of the music. And imagine if students always did that when they were sight playing as well.
Yeah, and counting yourself in rather than us counting them in. Simple little
that's right.
change that can make a difference. All right,
and the feeling of taking a breath as well. Taking a breath when you're playing or you're singing, but taking a breath because you have to on the recorder. Then when you refer to it later,
makes more sense.
Take a breath at this phrase. I must admit, the sound of recorders is not my favourite, but I can see the benefit.
It's funny to think back 20 years. Just about every kid in primary school in Australia, at least, learnt recorder. My sister and brother did. I don't think I did. I might have been the transition out of that. I don't know what really happened to that whole side of. I mean, we've got a challenge with elementary music education and classroom teachers being very few and far between, and programs being cut all over the place and things, but. I wonder what actually started that trend, and if it did start back with the recorders, maybe they just weren't cool enough.
Well,
I don't know.
I know that they still have a recorder choir from students all around New South Wales who go to the Opera House and perform together. So maybe that needs to go on your bucket list, Tim.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it's a Victorian thing. Anyway, all right, let's go back to the lesson.
Starting note, here's my starting note. You sing side, up nice and high. Can you sing? Yes. No, sing the words. Off we go. Silently the night creeps over, children slumbering in their beds. Is it a simple time song or a compound time song? Compound. How would...
Looks like we've moved on again there. So that was singing a duet from sight without accompaniment. That's not something I've even tried in a lesson. That's going a fair bit further, I guess, taking singing another step.
Yeah. I think sometimes we assume, oh, this child's only 7, they can't do this, they can't do that. But again, it's that sneaky repetition that Paul Mike talks about. It's the same piece of music and you're approaching it in multiple ways. That student goes home with that music so embedded in their brain and they understand, here's where I would breathe, here's where I would lift off my fingers, here's the tempo that I need it to be, here's me concentrating on my part but still hearing the counter melody. It's just as Emily would say, it's like you've taken a sponge and you're squeezing out all the goodness of this piece in that experience.
Yeah. And it was nice you both breathed to start with. I mean, these are simple musical gestures when playing in groups that pure piano students don't often get unless we do this kind of teaching. I only picked up that idea of breathing when I'm accompanying somebody because you don't really have to think about it otherwise, in order to get everybody started at the same time. So it explains a lot about how talented you are as a musician and a teacher now to see how far back this education went. Kudos to Edward. All right, should we keep going?
Yeah.
How would you move? Come out and move for us. All right. Ready? Okay. Okay, let's have the key of F major. Trick you. Key of A major.
Okay. No, she says.
Yeah, I know. So the first thing when you started that piece is he played the music and he just said, just move, I think. Just dance around. Is that right?
Yeah, he'd said, is this a compound or a simple
that's right.
meter piece? And we wouldn't normally think to ask a 7-year-old, is this a compound or a simple meter piece? No. But to get us to move to that music, then we can feel it. And it also confirms to the teacher that the student knows what compound feels like. And it also means this child is 7. So they're not actually up to abstract thinking. So this having a concrete way of feeling, when I think the music is this way, it's going to feel like this. Wouldn't we love all of our students to understand what compound meter feels like? We spend all this time trying to help them understand it from a mathematical point of view, whereas actually understanding how it feels and moving is probably the most natural way to do it.
But and that particularly solves that issue of students playing in 3/4 and adding an extra beat without really realising it and it ending up in 4/4. They don't feel it. They don't know what it feels like. Where you there were skipping. You're skipping around the room and then you were able to play it. This music's going to be stuck in our head all day.
Oh, it sure is. And then the funny thing was too, like obviously the skipping part is quite simple for students. But then he's like, let's play it. Let's add the chords to it. And then now let's play it in F major. Now let's play it in A major. Again, this is not... I don't think this was a regular 1984 piano lesson with a 7-year-old. But I don't think that it was I had a particular aptitude. I think it's that he'd just built all of these layers underneath so that he could continue to build on those things. So again, I actually teach keyboard harmony to my students. I've actually written curriculum that I use with my students that they can try and earn badges in different keys and earn badges for changing the time signature and playing a different time signature and so on. But it's also something that I did a lot at Yamaha. So I taught at Yamaha for 20 years, and keyboard harmony is a big part of that curriculum there too, where students kind of feel, it feels like this is 1 and 5/7 and this is 4 and so on. And if they started this with 7-year-old students, then imagine what they're able to understand when they're 14 and they're playing sonatas and things. Like you don't need to explain music theory to them because they've lived it.
Well said. All right, let's check out the last section.
Well, it's different every time. We never know what's going to happen. Did you have any idea in mind when you made up those variations?
Not really.
No? You told me a little story once. Would you like to tell them a little story you had?
Well, first of all,
Look at them.
First of all, I had the giants, and they were going to come up to the people and hurt them. And so the people ran away from the village, and the fairies came.
And where were you playing when the giants were coming?
Down in bass.
Down in the bass, oh.
So that was that a piece that you'd made up, or was that a given piece and you turned it into a story?
Yeah, so it's actually a very, very famous theme that I'd been playing, and we did variations on it. And there's so many things from just that little video clip, apart from the giant's big Australian accent. But that he said, "Did you have any ideas?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Didn't you have a story?" And then off I go about this giants and fairies and whatever else. That's just a snippet. Like the actual part of the lesson went for like 20 minutes with me doing variations, improvising variations or playing variations that we'd improvised before. But as a teacher, for him to know that there's more imagination happening and to keep coaxing it out of me until I was ready to share it with everyone, I think that was really clever. And also the idea that the giants, he's like, "Where did you play the giants?" I'm like, "Oh, in the bass." And I'd just been reminded of that and started using that with my students, is that, we do a lot of treble clef notes are up high and bass clef notes are down low. But if you just refer to this part of the piano as the bass, then it makes sense when you show them the stave. They can see it. So this reminds me, Tim, a little bit of your repertoire remix idea, that you're taking something that is known and playing it around with it a bit. But variations are such an easy way to get students being creative, because it's got more structure than just improvising freely. But it's so easy to do. We're going to do, it's like your animal story in Notebook Beginners. We're going to try to make this sound of this animal and so on.
Where would that be on the piano, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. What animal do you think this sounds like? But this is continuing on that theme. But by starting with variations, you've got something already to work with. I think sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm going to do composition with my student," and they hand them a piece of manuscript, and they're like, "Write out the first." This child is 7 years old and they just want to make a story of giants and fairies. You can still involve notation, but it doesn't have to come first. And I think all students can improvise, and I think all students can then learn how to create variations. So
one thing I did notice in some of the video was you did have a relatively flat pinky finger. And I know that a lot of teachers get very stressed and worried about perfecting technique and finger positions, buckled knuckles, bending back fingers, laying down fingers, all that kind of stuff. Now you play perfectly, beautifully. You don't do that anymore. Have you got any thoughts looking back on that at the hand position and things like that, and the worries that we often have, and how that just can sometimes develop over time as students grow?
Sure. I guess one of the main things is we're looking at an integrated lesson. We're looking at a lesson with lots of different things happening at once. But in a particular part of the lesson, you're like, well, what's the purpose of this activity? What are my goals right now? And if the goal is free-flowing, creative, imaginative exploration, then if you then work at a particular hand technique or something and take the focus towards that, then you actually might lose the spontaneity and the creativity and so on. And that's not saying that you shouldn't be teaching it. It's just that maybe that would be the focus in another part of the lesson where it's a piece of known repertoire or it's a technical exercise, that might be something that you focus more on in that aspect, depending on what the goal is, what the teaching point is for that part of your lesson.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good reminder particularly when you're being imaginative, creative, focus on that and don't worry about the other elements so much, because you can do that at a different time. So yeah, good reminder for teachers. So in kind of looking back on all of that, do you think Edward was ahead of his time a bit? Because as you say, I don't think many 1984 lessons would have been like that.
I think too, the exciting thing is that was in a lecture full of university students learning how to become music teachers. That's what the video was made for. Wow. That was they were present at that stage. So I think he was ahead of his time because he wasn't just trying out things that he could use with his own students. He was thinking, what does the research say? What have lots of people found that helps create musical performances, musical as in artistically musical performances? And then how can I distill that in a way that I can then communicate that with a room full of prospective music teachers? And hopefully over that subsequent time, there are lots of those teachers who've gone out and tried those same kinds of things as well. So I also think that, as I said, I think in those days it wasn't so common to think about needs of different students in terms of neurodivergence, but you could see that he was obviously responding really well to the particular needs of that student and making sure to incorporate lots of physical movement or different ways of doing things, novel ways of doing things. So, yeah, I'd love to hear a conversation between him and Dr. Anita Collins, actually.
So in wrapping up, what elements do you think have rubbed off in the biggest way from some of the things that he taught you in the way that you now teach?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I was at university, my professor said, what do you want to do with your degree? I'm like, I actually don't know. I just really love music and that's why I've come here. But then I said, I really enjoyed my lessons as a 7 and 8 year old and I think I might like to do that kind of thing, which is what I ended up doing there in Melbourne for 20 years, working with Yamaha and having those creative singing, using your whole body, keyboard harmony and transposition and variations and all those kinds of things. I just can't imagine teaching an open and go kind of approach, because I could see how much joy we had in our lessons, how much fun they were, and how I just learned so much from doing those things. So, yeah, those things continue to stay with me now, even though that was 40 years ago, that lesson.
And I can see that in all the work that you do with the teachers inside our community and our certification teachers. You know, you're working on these same things, getting these same skills across. And I was also sort of thinking about the background to the approach that Edward is taking, which is Kadai. And I can't remember what year Kadai was around, but that's what's 1800s, 1700s? I can't even remember.
Not sure.
But you know, Kadai, Orff, Suzuki, these have been around for a long time. Yeah. And it's, in some ways, it's sad that it's not more common in one-on-one lessons. But I think the work that everyone is doing around the world now and that you're contributing to, Beck, is actually helping make this a more regular thing, because you can just see the power of it.
And this is just seeing a 5-minute snippet of a much, much, much longer lesson. And we had tuned percussion in the Orff style. We had improvising on a pentatonic scale using the tuned percussion. We were using Suzuki repertoire. We had things from book 1, things from book 2, things with Alberti bass. essentially a lot of Suzuki approach is rote and by ear kind of approach. All of these things combining together to make one like super method of teaching, which is student centered, and it is creative, and it is using what we understand about theory and research into how our brains work, and understanding pedagogy from perspective of people who've dedicated their entire lives to teaching and understanding music well, and then finding a way to connect that with a precocious 7-year-old. That's, we have to take what we can understand from lots of other people and find a way to put that into place in a practical setting.
Well, I'm delighted. Next week on the show, we are going to meet Edward himself. I'm interviewing him and finding out about the other side of the story. So how he came to be doing this and where his life took him. He's got an incredible life narrative that we're going to unpack. And I know that you will come up in conversation, I'm sure, Beck, a few times. Thank you so much for sharing this with all our listeners. It's been great to hang out with you today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great. And if anyone wants to find a really long version, let me know.
Okay. Thanks again, Beck. See you soon.
Thanks. See you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode looking back on a vintage piano lesson from 1984. How forward-thinking was it when you consider the courses we've run and the programs we've hosted in the last few years all about whole body learning and the importance of singing, and just looking at my own notebook beginner's book and framework, which is all about movement and singing and creativity and imagination. That's what we were seeing way back then from this remarkable teacher. Now, if you'd like to see that lesson in action and see the movement and how he interacts with Beck, then just head over to my YouTube channel. Just search for topmusic.co over on YouTube if you're not too sure. And make sure you subscribe while you're over there. I'd love to build my subscriber base. We release videos on a regular basis on our YouTube channel, and they're not necessarily things I talk about on the podcast or on the blog. They're even more different information. So make sure you do tune into that every week. It's completely free, of course. And I do love sharing ideas over there. Now, next week on the show, we actually get to meet the teacher from today's episode. Dr. Edward Gifford will be joining me on the show to talk all about his experience as a teacher way back then, and then his move to university teaching, and then on to life coaching and some incredible changes and challenges that he's had to overcome in his life. It's a really moving episode. I hope you'll be able to join me then. Until then, I'm Tim Topham, and you've been listening to the Topcast. Thank you so much for joining in, and thank you very much for all those reviews that do come in from time to time. We appreciate it, and we thank you for all the hard work that you're doing with your students around the world. Keep it up. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our TopMusic Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, TopMusic Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more of our work, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, visit us at topmusic.co/podcast or check out the show notes. I'm Tim Topham. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your week ahead, and I'll catch you next time.